Hello, everybody. All right, on. We got that good energy. I love that. I hope everybody enjoyed Open Spaces. Did you like the Open Spaces, everybody? You had a good time? Excellent. Glad to hear it. We have, and I said this before, and I'm going to say it again, we still have some great content. Not only this afternoon, but also tomorrow. We have 2 more talks still to go today, I think. Really excited for both of these. Really excited to see that everybody is still here, still ready to go, still engaged. So please give a big round of applause to Sasha, Czarkwoski, Rosenbaum.
Hi. Hello. I did change my last name to one you will never be able to spell or pronounce again, just to make it really hard to find me on social media. It's Czarkwoski, by the way.
Yeah, I'm gonna...
This is fun. So there are a lot of talks you write for different reasons. Sometimes you write it for like some topic that you must show your job or whatever. This one I wrote for me because there was a realization that I came to in my 30s that kind of changed my life, and I've been thinking about how many people haven't seen that stuff and how I want to teach more people about this. And it's about learning because, like, since I've been in technology, the world changes every year, the languages we use, the tools we use, how fast we go. There's always change, and so if we don't know how to learn, we don't know how to progress in our careers, we don't know how to survive in tech, right? So I think that's probably the most important insight that we can gain. So I've worked for some companies, did some jobs, largely in the tech industry, have a couple degrees. You may have heard about the people that I work with right now. I was foolish enough to start my own company, but smart enough to pick very intelligent partners. Andrew and Jabe, you might have met some of them before. Before I get started talking, I want to ask you a couple questions. So one is, there's a statement, you can learn new things, but you can never really change how intelligent you are. From 0 to 100%, how much do you agree with this? Someone shout. 50. Okay. 0, anybody 0? Anybody 100%? Couple people? Okay. And second question, do you ever call yourself lazy? Yes. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about learning. And so the biggest insight I've had in the past year that I'm pondering right now is we cannot teach another person directly. We can only facilitate learning. This is by Carl Rogers, who is a very well-renowned psychologist, the father of positive psychology, done a lot of work in the US to sort of create the approach to psychology we all use today. So if I can't teach people, and I've been teaching people for a number of years, right? Why am I on stage at all if I can't teach you? Well, this is a fake Buddha quote, and it says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So what I can do is I can give you information, right? So I can give you information, and I can provide you with access or pointers for more information. I cannot give you insight. Any insights we arrive at are our own, right? And so you kind of have to be at the right time. You kind of have to be at the right level of skill or understanding to appreciate what I'm saying, but hopefully I can point you in the right direction. So speaking of information, if you scan this QR code, I will also have it at the end of the talk. There's a list of resources. There's a lot of books, a lot of papers. This is a non-exhaustive list, and I just keep reading more. And I'm quoting one particular book a lot because it kind of summarizes an approach, right? But it isn't the only book we've read and researched, and I can talk about this for a day. I'm only talking about this for 20 minutes, so it's going to be a lot of nuggets of information. In fact, I am talking about this for a day in New York in a couple of weeks. So if you happen to be in New York in October, check out DevOpsCon. So I will tell you a personal story. It requires some vulnerability to share. I was a bookworm growing up. I was a child that's always found in a book, with a nose in a book and like always reading. And it kind of didn't matter. I read sci-fi, I read classics, I read books about physics, whatever. Everything was interesting to me. And then I went through high school and then I enrolled in a technical university and I enrolled in biology. And after the first semester in biology, we grew a lot of yeast and fruit flies. And I was like, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I looked around and I was like, I had a couple of friends in computer science and they were very excited. And I was like, okay, I'm going for computer science. I had one Pascal class in high school. It seemed interesting. This was the best decision of my life because it turns out I really like programming computers. However, the other thing that happened was I had a grade average of 94 out of 100, and I went to like 68 or something along these lines. It's like basically all C's. And like this is my real face when I looked at the grades for the semester. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not good. Clearly, I can't just skate through and show up to a couple lectures and figure it out. And So I'm like, okay, this is a really good university. All rankings are lies, but at the moment I was going to university at the Technion, it was in top 20 for computer science, so got to mean something. I'm like, okay, top 20 university in the world, I'm competing with the best students. I should just study more. I need to sit down and look at textbooks and put more effort into it. So I opened the textbook, and it's no longer my friend. I used to love books, and now I'm looking at a book, and I'm struggling. I'm hating it. I'm not enjoying myself. I can't learn anything. The voice in my head is just like, you're not smart enough for this. This is not, it's never going to work. Like, you spend 2 hours, you don't understand this. So, of course, this didn't, it wasn't really great. So I went partying instead. So I partied through a couple more semesters. This picture is here because it's a picture of a party, but also because I watched all of the seasons of Sex and the City instead of studying for a calculus exam. This is not a great show. It's definitely not about how great the show was. It's about how much I was trying to avoid the subject. So this was classic fixed mindset. I didn't know what a fixed mindset was. No one told me about it. I wish that someone gave me this book before I went to college, because it would have changed my college experience. But the growth mindset is kind of like DevOps. 5 years ago, nobody knew what growth mindset was. And today, everybody thinks they know what a growth mindset is. So when you say, oh, I want to talk to you about growth mindset, like, yeah, we've heard about it. It's fine. We're very open here. Like, okay. So in reality, fixed mindset means that you believe you can learn new things, but you can't change your level of intelligence, right? The statement we started with. And growth mindset, it means that you can always substantially change how intelligent you are. Your core belief about this is what sort of determines how much growth mindset you have. And you can be anywhere on this scale. So it's not a binary, like I have a growth mindset, I have a fixed mindset. No, I can be in a different level of mindset about different parts of my life. So I could believe that in physical ability, the more I exercise, the more I work on something, the better I get. But in intelligence, I was born with the level of IQ, and that's it. Or I can believe that, for instance, in the level of intelligence, I can learn, I can improve, I can get better. But in creative ability, well, I can't paint, so therefore I can't improve that ability. The good news is the more growth mindset you have, the better your experience in life, right? Usually at this point, people have a question, and that question is like, well, what about talent? We talk about all these gifted children, we talk about people with abilities. So there's a couple of answers to this, right? So one is, there's a concept called 10,000-hour rule. Comes from Malcolm Gladwell from the book Outliers. So it says, they researched performers and it came to a conclusion that what mattered is not the level of initial talent, but the 10,000 hours of work that people really put into it. Turns out they misunderstood the research a little bit. The real research comes from this guy. And So it did matter how talented people were in the beginning. So like some level of initial ability did matter. And the other thing that mattered a lot was they engaged in deliberate practice. And deliberate practice is something that involves feedback and modification of efforts in response to feedback. So we all know a bunch of people who play golf or tennis or something on the weekend and have been playing it for 10 years and they never get better because they don't have a coach, because they don't engage in deliberate practice, because they don't have accurate feedback for how they're doing. So they're just continuing to skate at the same level of performance. Whereas the elite performers in sports and music, they have coaches and they have very timely feedback and they work on one skill at a time, right? So they improve one particular part of how they're doing. And then there's a related concept of kind and wicked domains. So kind domains are those in which there is immediate and accurate feedback of how you're doing. So this guy did some research in, for instance, how doctors do with experience. So apparently surgeons improve with experience because they have immediate and accurate feedback for how they are doing. But radiologists get worse with experience because they look at scans and they never see the patient and they never actually know if they diagnose the patient correctly or not. So your level of experience is not necessarily indicative, it's how much accurate feedback you get for how you're doing. And we're very good with immediate feedback, very bad with delayed feedback, right? So if you wanted to learn something, shortcut that loop, right? Shortcut that feedback loop as much as you can. So I would summarize it as your starting point matters, but what matters more is effort and feedback that you get in a particular domain. And then if I had to summarize fixed mindset or growth mindset in a couple words, fixed mindset is a belief that what matters most is your inborn abilities, and growth mindset is about effort and feedback. Now, the reason I'm talking about this concept, and again, it resurfaces in all the organizational learning books, like people call it different words, but it is basically always the same. This is a highly limiting belief. If I think that I could never improve from what I was born with, then I'm done. And everything I ever face is a test, right? Because I'm always testing, like, am I good enough for this? Am I good enough for the next one? Am I good enough for the next one? Whereas if I truly believe that I can improve my performance, everything is an opportunity to learn and improve. So the way I see it, we can suffer while proving ourselves, or we can enjoy while improving ourselves. But the stories we tell ourselves are not like that. Because our culture doesn't talk about mindsets, and our culture doesn't really, it pays lip service to learning, but it doesn't really encourage learning. So the stories we tell ourselves is, I'm lazy. So we will sit in front of an undone task and we will berate ourselves for being lazy. We tell our children that they're lazy, and we tell our employees that they're lazy. But I don't think that people are lazy at all. So I like cats. Well-fed cats can sleep for 12 to 16 hours a day. And the rest of the time, they're probably lying around looking pretty. This is a pandemic joke I'm not going to explain, but you are not a cat. No. And I have a test for you. You can conduct an experiment. You can go home, sit on the couch, turn off all of your devices, and try to sit and do nothing for 5 minutes. Chances are, after 2 minutes, you really want to go do something, maybe even something creative. So this is a shout out to John. This is a quote from Deming. People are born with intrinsic motivation, self-esteem, dignity, curiosity to learn, and joy in learning. So we have all this intrinsic motivation. In fact, kids are excellent learners. They're born wanting to learn everything. They're born wanting to excel. They have an inherent drive for mastery. We kind of beat it out of them. And the other thing is, this is a quote from Dynaman, you're lazy, no, constantly stressing about all the things I'm putting off actually takes a lot of work. In other words, the choice, when you procrastinate a thing, the choice isn't working or not working. It's what work you engage in. How many of us procrastinate an important task by doing other work or doing something unimportant, right? Playing a video game or something like that. So why do we procrastinate? The primary answer to why we procrastinate is fear. There are different kinds of fear. Very popular is the fear of failure. Also very popular is the fear of success. We can talk about that for a while. Very often, it's a fear of being imperfect, right? So like, you will procrastinate because you fear that what your output will not be up to some kind of perfectionism standard. So you will put it off until your fear of failing the task or your fear of failing the exam, for instance, will be greater than your fear of being imperfect. So fear is the enemy of learning, and I think, again, in all of these books that were on that resource slide, fear is the enemy of learning comes up over and over and over again. And in any setting, whether it's for yourself in your own head or whether it's an organization, if you are in fear of making mistakes or of looking not smart enough or of anything else, you will be not able to learn new things. And the other way to phrase this is that threat to self is the enemy of learning. And so we get back to Carl Rogers a little bit. The educational system, which is most likely promotes significant learning, is one in which threat to self as a learner is reduced to a minimum. So the true challenge is that the game is rigged against us, because our schools are actually excellent at reinforcing fixed mindset. Actually, the entire game is set up to classify, to evaluate, and to constantly grade people and to basically create this pass-fail mentality. So, little known fact, the IQ test was designed by Alfred Binet to measure progress in learning, and yet we use it to classify students and put them in buckets and tell them they could never exceed the result they got. We constantly evaluate and classify students. The other key part of this is praise. So praise was very popular about 30 years ago, and we were all told to praise everybody all the time. So Carol Dweck did research that said ability praise is very bad for you. So if you praise children for being smart or talented, they actually do worse on subsequent tasks. And it's like immediate effect. They not just do worse, they also fake their results because they're afraid of failing. So in her research, it was that effort praise was significantly better. So telling people like, that you did so well because you put effort into it. New research that came out largely says that no praise is the best praise. What you want to give people is informational feedback. Rather than saying, you're doing great, good job, excellent, you're such an artist, you're such a smart person, whatever, you just give people informational feedback. You did this and this, I see it here, this is, I don't know, a red circle on a white line, whatever. The other thing is our hero stories erase all mention of effort. If you dive into a biography of anyone successful, you always find that this was an overnight success 10 years in the making. But we always tell the story of a prodigy that woke up and then suddenly were good at basketball or at VC funding or at I don't know what. They just invented everything and were such a genius. So effort in a fixed mindset is a bad thing. It, like failure, means you're not smart or talented. If you were, you wouldn't need effort. In other words, I failed. It doesn't matter as long as you tried your best. Oh, I didn't do that either. That didn't do that either is actually a way to escape responsibility for failing. So there's this idea of self-handicapping, and basically this is when people create or report performance obstacles. So either they actually don't study for an exam like I did, or they tell you they didn't study for an exam to excuse the fact they're failing so that doesn't threaten their self-worth. So I come to organizational learning. I'm only going to spend a couple minutes on that. But there's, again, a lot of research into this, and a lot of it comes up with sort of very similar insights. So I'm going to say something very surprising to all of you. Organizations are made of people. So there's no organizational learning without individual learning. So some of the same dynamics play, right? You can't, if the individuals in an organization cannot learn, then the organization cannot learn. And every organization can set up a climate that's either encouraging or discouraging individual learning. So one of the research that came out was about psychological safety, which again is an absence of fear and the ability of people to make mistakes without fearing punishment, right? It's kind of the same concept in organizational learning. Then there's another part of it, which is organizations are more than some of their people. So yes, individuals in the organization need to learn, but also the organization itself has the ability to learn. That's actually kind of controversial because some researchers say it's only the individuals. But I like this quote from Jay. What does it mean for an organization to learn? The learning is embedded in an organizational network in the same way the human learning is embedded in connections between neurons. So like each neuron can have some sorts of insights, and then you have the connections, and then the important connections strengthen, and then you have this network in the organization that is not the same as the org chart, but is more important than the org chart, and that is how things get done. And how many times have we seen this in the organization? So the other thing that is coming from research is that most organizations engage in what's called defensive reasoning. So we all say we want a learning organization, but in fact, a lot of us don't, or don't do that in real life. So defensive reasoning is, in very short term, making sure that the collected data confirms the highest paid person opinion. So basically, you emphasize rationality, you collect data, you collect metrics, but it's all driven towards like the CEO said that this must work, or like this whatever level person said we must do this change, or whatever. So you then, like, we said we were going to do a DevOps transformation. Then you engage in basically creating the metrics that show that the DevOps transformation was successful. And if you can't do that, then you basically are failing in your organization. So your goal is actually to engage in productive reasoning. And productive reasoning revolves around creating a testable hypothesis and monitoring the implementation to prove or disprove it. So kind of think about it like A/B testing or progressive rollout of your software. You're basically doing that, right? In your software, you're rolling it out to 1% of users, and then you're seeing how you're doing. And then if it doesn't work, you just roll it back. So think about it in terms of organizational learning too. The experiments you do don't have to be successful. You don't have to prove that your original idea was great. You just have to learn something new. So you may learn that the idea wasn't great, but it's still good for you. And then one great thing that everybody forgets all the time is EQ skills require practice. So we all think that we read a book or we listened to a lecture and we're like, these were great ideas, I love it, now I'm going to be different. But in reality, what you need is to exercise, right? You need to learn the skill, and any EQ skills require just as much practice as your physical skills. And that practice also requires feedback, right? So you also need to make sure that you set up a feedback loop, that you have practitioners that can actually help facilitate your journey to success. And then if you remember nothing else from this talk, is fear is the enemy of learning. So we want to reduce the fear that people face when facing new challenges. So that's it for me. And you can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and you can find the resources for this talk in this QR code. And thank you very much.